Hello and welcome to the Livia McHugh Show. My name is Laura Reines. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am super duper excited about our topic today. We are going to be talking about delayed gratification, and that is a topic that is so fascinating to me because it seems to be something that so many of us, including myself, struggle with from time to time. So what got me started thinking about this topic was an article that I was reading this morning talking about a study, a scientific study or psychological study, if you will, that was done in the late 1960s and into the 1970s. It was referred to as the marshmallow test. And the whole purpose of this study was to look at a 4-year-old child's ability to delay gratification. Now, some of you who have children who are 4 or who have been 4, or if you've been around children of that age, you know that's really difficult for them to delay gratification at that age. So I think that is part of why the scientist decided to work with that age group. The scientist's name was Walter Mischel. And what he did was he took 4-year-old children, he placed them in a small room with a marshmallow, a single marshmallow. And he told those children that they could eat the marshmallow if they waited for 15 minutes. And if they were able to do that, to wait for the 15 minutes, then they would get not 1, but 2 marshmallows. So he was saying, you hold off now and your reward will be doubled. So he left the room. And it's interesting to note the results. Most of the 4-year-olds made it about a minute before they succumbed and ate the marshmallow. Some kids didn't make it that long. The research that I read said that the second he left the room, some kids were eating their marshmallow. But then there were some kids that did make it the whole entire 15 minutes, and then they ended up getting 2 marshmallows. Well, as you can imagine, this experiment really tested the concept of willpower. And the interesting thing to note, or the interesting difference, was why was it that some kids were able to wait and other kids were not? What gives? So they did some follow-up with these kids years later to try and figure out, what was the difference, or did it make a difference, actually, if the kids were able to wait and delay gratification or if they were not? Well, what they found with their follow-up years later is that those children that were able to wait and not eat that marshmallow right away, they had fewer problems with behavior, so fewer behavioral issues, fewer addiction type issues, and even less obesity by the time that they reached high school. So they did kind of a longitudinal study where they followed these kids, or at least checked back in with those kids, between the time they were 4 years old and the time when they were in high school. And these children, interestingly enough, also scored higher on the SAT or other standardized tests. And so Mr. Mischel, the researcher, referred to these children as high delay children. So what does this even mean? Like, why do we even care about this? Well, to start off with, I thought I'd give you a little definition of delayed gratification, and that is the ability to resist temptation for immediate reward and wait for a later reward. So what we see with delayed gratification is usually we have to resist something smaller to get something bigger in the long run. And what we found is discipline is believed to be the key to that success. And discipline is something I think that we have to continuously be teaching ourselves and to be developing our own self-discipline. But if you happen to have parents or work with children, it's something that we have to teach our children as well. It's really all about patience. An interesting quote I want to share with you is by Sade, and it says, "Have patience. All things are difficult before they become easy." And I think that's true even with, when it's midnight and you really want that hot fudge sundae. It's really, really difficult to resist it. But it seems like if you're able to resist and kind of fight through that initial craving, it seems like it gets easier to resist it as time goes on. What we see with humans at birth, babies have next to no impulse control. When they're hungry, they cry. When they're wet, they cry. When they're uncomfortable, they cry. When they wake up from a nap, you guessed it, they cry. And so they're not able to delay. They're not going to just quit crying and say, well, I guess I should wait for mom or dad to come and pick me up. They want it now. We see impulse control kind of or I should say lack of impulse control kind of peak at the age of 4. And that's when children just have next to no impulse control. Think about being in the store and seeing the little kid flopping around on the floor because they want candy or they want this toy. 4 years old is kind of the peak for that. And then typically by the time kids get to be about 5 years old, that starts to improve a little bit. And by the time the child is 12, 13, 14, we should see a vast improvement in the child's ability to wait and to delay gratification. But the sad thing is, we don't necessarily see that in our society. Sometimes impulse control tends to almost lessen with time. I mean, have you ever seen a 13-year-old's tantrum? It's not a pretty picture. And part of this is because we live in a society that is not patient. It doesn't value patience. We're not rewarded for our patience. And if you doubt me, I got a couple scenarios for you. Just think through these with me. How many times have you been in your car and you've been honked at, flipped the bird, sworn at, or even worse, if you're not out in the middle of the intersection the second the light turns green? I know in the city that I live in, it's so common. People expect you have to put your life at risk to get out there in the intersection because they're right behind you and doggone it, they got to get to where they're going. Or how many times were you met with angry sighs if it took you longer than the person behind you thought it should to check out at the grocery store? And this one, I got to tell you, this next one is my ultimate pet peeve. Have you ever been in the grocery store and you're doing the self-check, beep, beep, you're minding your business, zapping things through, not purposely being slow by any means, but you turn around and there's a person behind you that's waiting to check out after you. But for some reason, they can't wait until you're done. So they start sneaking up closer, closer, crowding you with their cart. And heaven forbid, sometimes they even start unloading their stuff onto the belt when you clearly have a full belt already, so they start moving your stuff and pushing it so that they can unload your stuff. Had it happen, I absolutely hate it. So this is patience. I want to turn around to that person and say, can you just wait? If you're in that much of a hurry, I mean, there's something wrong. You got to plan a little better or something. But all that to say, we're not a very patient people. We're not a very patient society. If we go to our favorite restaurant and we have to wait more than 10 minutes to get, our table on a Friday or Saturday night, we freak out. We don't want to wait that long. And so we're looking at what is the source of this impatience, this inability to delay gratification. And the reading that I've done has suggested that a lot of it is from the media. Now, definitely as a person who loves the media, I'm not blaming the media per se. I'm just saying that it's become so commonplace for us to expect instant gratification. This carries over into our workplaces. We don't want to wait and work for a promotion. We want it now. We want a raise now. If you want to throw people into a tizzy, tell them that their paychecks will be coming a day later because of some processing error or something like that. People will totally freak out. In marriages, we want a perfect marriage, and the second it isn't perfect, sometimes, in some cases, we decide that it's better to part ways rather than work through it, delay gratification, work now on our marriage for a more positive end result later. And I think part of it too is we're such a multitasking society. We can do so many things at once. And I think that doesn't really help us to be patient either. We don't have to wait to do anything. We can do these 4 things at once. And I'm not sure that we do any one thing successfully or to the best of our ability when we're always kind of trying to do so many things at once. Another quote, "The key to everything is patience. You get to the chicken by hatching the egg, not by smashing it." And that quote comes from Arnold H. Glasow. So how do we learn to delay gratification in this world where there's such a high value placed on immediacy in the here and now? Going back to the study that I opened the program with today, for those children, what they found is the key was distraction. So those kids that were able to distract themselves away from the marshmallow were able to wait it out more than those who just sat in a chair and kind of focused on the marshmallow. So those kids that played with toys and, hummed or whistled to themselves or did whatever they needed to do, tapped their foot, they were more able to resist that temptation. Basically, they tried to just get that cookie out of their minds. And interestingly enough, when we look at instant gratification, research tends to show that girls are slightly slightly better at delaying gratification than boys. And what research has shown is that's because boys are very impulsive. I mean, if you look at a 4-year-old little boy, he can go from thought to action in 0.00001 second. That's not to say girls are better than boys or anything, but what they're finding is that boys just are more impulsive. They have the idea, they see it, they think about it, they do it. So going back to this study, the researcher did kind of a follow-up, and what he did is he placed 2 marshmallows this time side by side in front of a different group of children. And he explained to one group that eating the first marshmallow before he returned would mean that they couldn't have the second. So we got these 2 marshmallows, and he said, if you eat this, you don't get the second one. Then he instructed one of the groups to imagine how much marshmallows are like clouds. You know, he'd say they're round and they're puffy, they're soft, they're white, you know, they're pretty, or whatever he might have said. And then he asked another group to imagine what they taste like. How sweet, how does a marshmallow taste? How sweet is that and chewy, and how soft? And then he had a third group, and he asked them to think about pretzels. You heard it right. He asked them to think about pretzels, how crunchy they are, how salty, you know, what it feels like to bite into a pretzel. And so these were his groups and the tasks that he gave each of them. So the results are really interesting because what ended up happening is the children that visualized the qualities of the marshmallow that were the most unrelated to eating them. So the ones that thought about clouds, because I mean we don't eat clouds. So those children that were making that comparison in their mind between marshmallows and clouds, they waited nearly 3 times as long as those who were instructed to visualize how does it feel to bite into a marshmallow, you know, the sweetness, the chewiness. But the most interesting thing of all is that the kids that thought about the pretzels and what it's like to eat a pretzel, they were the most successful of all. So thinking about something that was not even available to the kids at that moment ended up being the thing that helped them to most successfully stay away from eating it. So what does this have to do with any of us? Well, we've learned that one of the most effective ways to distract ourselves is to focus on another unavailable pleasure. So it's midnight and you really, really want that ice cream. You can see it in the freezer. You know what it tastes like. It has little nuts and little gooey stuff in there, and oh my gosh, it's just driving you nuts. Well, now try to focus on salted peanuts, if you don't have salted peanuts in your house. And think about they're salty and they're crunchy. They kind of get stuck in your teeth. They stick with you for a long time. Just kind of think about that. Wow, you'd be surprised at the way that can delay your impulse for that ice cream or for that ice cream sundae. And it just seems like if we're able to master this whole skill, if you will, of delaying gratification, there are many positive outcomes for the present as well as in the future. I mean, think about this sundae, this ice cream example that I just gave you. If we can delay our gratification with food when we're not really hungry, think of the pounds that we will spare ourselves. We won't eat when we're not hungry. If we are able to delay gratification on spending, you know, we see something in the store and we think, oh my gosh, I have to have that bag, I have to have those shoes, I have to have that flat screen TV, that laptop. If we're able to delay gratification and think about something else in order to step away and to make sure, do we really want it, do we really need it, think of the money that we might save ourselves. I mean, and think of the credit issues that maybe we wouldn't even have, or the repayment or interest issues. Going back to my automobile example, think of the accidents that could be avoided if we're not just like speeding out into the intersection the second the light turns green, or if we're not trying to, you know, be that last car to squeak through the intersection when the light is still yellow. Think of the safety issues that we might not ever have to deal with if that's the case. So what we found in closing here today with this delayed gratification concept is that it's definitely a learned skill. Practice makes perfect with this. So what I want to know from you, I want this to be kind of an interactive part of the show for me. Almost couldn't get that out. I want this to be kind of interactive. Tell me, what are some things that you do to delay gratification, and do those things work for you? And then think about in life, in society, are there groups of people that you would like to see delay gratification? And what do you think would be the effects? I think if we didn't think we had to have everything, when we don't have money for it, maybe people wouldn't shoplift as much. If we didn't feel the pressure to buy our kids all those wonderful goodies that are right by the checkout, maybe there would be fewer cavities or less money spent on dental visits. Maybe we wouldn't need to be fighting wars. Maybe, I don't know, there could be all kinds of things, all kinds of positive effects of learning to delay gratification. So, my request of you is to kind of give that some thought. What do you do to delay gratification, and does it work? And then another, who are some people or what are some groups that you would like to see learn to delay gratification, and what do you think the results or the effects might be? So give that some thought if you would, and then go ahead and tweet me your responses. I do have a Twitter page, and you can find me at Luranium4. That's the at symbol, Lauranium, and then the number 4, and that's on Twitter. So go ahead and give me a little bit of your reactions to this. I'd be very interested in learning kind of what you think about that. So that's about all the time that I have for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm looking forward to reading some of your responses on Twitter. And until I see you, or until I talk to you again, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thanks again for listening.